In the endless silence of ancient India, where the golden sunlight touched the peaks of the Himalayas and the rivers flowed like silver threads through the valleys, there lived a kingdom called Benares. It was a land of prosperity and beauty, ruled by a wise king named Brahmadatta. The people lived peacefully under his protection, the fields were abundant, and merchants traveled across distant lands carrying precious goods. Yet, even in a kingdom filled with wealth, there remained one truth that no human could escape: everything that is gathered will one day separate. Everything that is possessed will one day be lost. Everything that is born will one day fade. Deep within that kingdom, in a noble Brahmin family blessed with great wealth and knowledge, a child was born. From his earliest years, the child displayed extraordinary intelligence. His parents invited the greatest teachers of the land to educate him. He learned languages, philosophy, medicine, astronomy, mathematics, rituals, and every skill that was considered valuable among the people of his time. As years passed, he became admired throughout the kingdom. Many believed that he would inherit his family's fortune, become a respected leader, and enjoy a life filled with honor, comfort, and influence. But inside his heart, another question slowly awakened. One evening, as he looked upon the treasures stored within his family mansion, he saw something that others could not see. Gold remained silent. Jewels could not speak. Beautiful houses could not protect their owners from sickness, old age, and death. The servants who protected wealth would eventually disappear. The people who enjoyed luxury would eventually leave everything behind. He began to understand a profound truth: a person may own countless treasures, yet still remain poor if the heart is controlled by attachment. The young Brahmin looked at the endless cycle of desire that surrounded him. People worked their entire lives to gain possessions. Then they spent their lives protecting those possessions. And finally, they left everything behind. The things they fought for, worried about, and sacrificed their peace for would belong to someone else. That night, beneath the quiet moonlight, the young man made a decision. He would not spend his life chasing shadows. He would search for something beyond temporary happiness. Something that could not be taken away by time. Something that existed beyond birth and death. After his parents passed away, he inherited the enormous wealth of his family. Yet instead of becoming attached to it, he saw it as a final opportunity to practice compassion. He opened the gates of his mansion. He distributed gold to the poor. He gave food to the hungry. He provided clothing to those who suffered from poverty. He gave away everything that generations of his family had accumulated. People were astonished. Some questioned him, "Why would you abandon such fortune? You were born into privilege. Why choose the life of a wandering ascetic? You could have become powerful and respected. Why throw away everything?" The young Brahmin simply smiled. He answered, "Fortune that cannot follow me beyond death is not truly mine. Possessions that create fear of loss are chains, not freedom. I seek a treasure that cannot decay. After giving away his entire inheritance, he left the world of comfort behind. He walked alone toward the distant Himalayas. The journey was long, the roads were difficult. The mountains were cold and silent. But with every step, his heart became lighter. The further he traveled away from human society, the closer he felt to the truth he had been searching for. At last, he reached a deep forest hidden among the snowy mountains. There, where only birds, animals, and the whispering wind remained, he built a small grass hut. The hut was simple. There were no golden decorations, no servants, no luxury. Only a quiet place where the mind could become still. He survived on wild fruits, roots, and water from mountain streams. He wore simple clothing. He slept little. He spent his days and nights observing his thoughts, calming his mind, and cultivating deep meditation. He followed the pure life of a forest sage. He guarded his senses carefully. He avoided distractions. He practiced patience, mindfulness, and compassion. Years passed. Then decades passed. Through unwavering effort, his mind became as clear as a mountain lake untouched by storms. The 5 hindrances of the mind gradually weakened. Greed became quiet. Anger became quiet. Delusion became quiet. His concentration became profound. Eventually, he entered deep states of meditation known as the 4 jhanas. His consciousness expanded beyond ordinary experience. He attained the 8 meditative attainments. Through his cultivation, he gained extraordinary abilities. He could travel through the sky. He could move with freedom beyond ordinary limitations. Beings from distant realms and spirits of the mountains came to honor him. They respected his purity. They admired his discipline. They knew that such a person was rare in the world. Yet, despite these achievements, the sage remained humble. He did not think, "I have conquered desire forever." He did not think, "I am beyond temptation." He simply continued his practice, knowing that the path of awakening required constant vigilance. For deep within every being, hidden beneath layers of calmness and discipline, there may still exist seeds of old habits. Seeds that wait silently. Seeds that may awaken when the right conditions appear. And even the strongest tree can fall when struck by the perfect storm. Not far from this forest lived another ascetic. This second sage had also practiced meditation for many years. His discipline was powerful. His wisdom was respected. Like the first sage, he had achieved extraordinary concentration and supernatural abilities. The 2 sages occasionally met among the mountains. They discussed the Dharma. They praised the beauty of a pure life. They encouraged each other to continue walking the difficult path toward liberation. Neither of them knew that one day, a single moment would test everything they had built. A single glance. A single instant. A hidden desire rising from the depths of the mind. And from that moment, a great lesson about human nature would begin. The ink spirit whispers *. Even a mountain that stands for thousands of years is shaped by tiny drops of rain. In the same way, the heart must be protected not only from great storms, but also from the smallest seeds of attachment. The mountains remained silent. The rivers continued flowing. The seasons changed one after another. And deep within the Himalayan forest, the two sages continued walking their separate paths of cultivation. For many years, they lived without distraction. They had abandoned the noise of ordinary life. They had left behind the endless pursuit of wealth, recognition, and pleasure. Their days were filled with meditation. Their nights were filled with contemplation. They watched the rising sun illuminate the snow-covered peaks. They listened to the wind moving through ancient trees. They observed the changing clouds and understood the impermanence of all things. To ordinary people, such a life might appear lonely. But to those who had discovered inner peace, the forest was not empty. The forest was a great teacher. Every leaf carried a lesson. Every stream reflected the truth of change. Every moment reminded them that all things arise and pass away. The first sage, the Bodhisattva of this lifetime, continued to deepen his practice. His mind became steady like a mountain that could not be shaken by storms. His compassion grew wider. His wisdom became brighter. He no longer searched for happiness outside himself. He had discovered a quiet joy that came from within. The second sage also appeared to be equally accomplished. For many years, he had practiced strict discipline. He controlled his senses. He guarded his thoughts. He lived alone in the wilderness, far away from the temptations of the world. Because of his dedication, he also developed extraordinary abilities. He could rise into the sky through the power of meditation. He could travel across great distances effortlessly. Spiritual beings who lived among the mountains came to pay respect to him. They admired his purity. They praised his determination. Many believed that such a person had already conquered the deepest struggles of the human mind. But hidden beneath the surface of his calm appearance was something he himself had not completely understood. A seed. A forgotten seed. A seed buried deep within consciousness. The Buddha would later teach that even when a person appears completely peaceful, old habits and tendencies may remain hidden within the deepest layers of the mind, like a dry forest waiting for a single spark. Like a sleeping fire beneath ashes. A small external condition can awaken what has been silently waiting. The sage had spent decades controlling his desires. But he had not yet discovered the full depth of the hidden attachments within his own heart. One day, the two sages met beside a clear mountain stream. The morning mist floated gently above the water. Birds sang among the trees. The golden sunlight passed through the leaves and painted the forest floor with moving patterns of light. They sat together and discussed the Dharma. They spoke about the nature of the mind. They spoke about discipline. They spoke about the importance of guarding the senses. The first sage said, "Even a person who has walked far along the path must continue watching the mind carefully. Because desire does not always appear as a powerful enemy. Sometimes it comes quietly. Sometimes it appears as something harmless. But if the mind welcomes it, a small thought can become a great storm." The second sage listened respectfully. He agreed with these teachings. He believed he understood them. But understanding a teaching intellectually and experiencing it directly are two different things. The greatest test does not come when everything is peaceful. The greatest test comes unexpectedly. When conditions change. When the mind encounters something it has not prepared for. Several months later, an event occurred that would completely change the second sage's life. In the kingdom of Benares, King Brahmadatta decided to travel into the Himalayan countryside. The king wished to escape the responsibilities of court life and enjoy the beauty of nature. He brought with him many royal attendants. Among them were queens, noble ladies, and servants. The royal group traveled deep into the forest. The sound of music followed them. Colorful garments moved among the trees. The peaceful wilderness was suddenly filled with human activity. The king and his companions eventually arrived near the place where the sages practiced. But because the forest was vast, the royal group did not know that great meditators lived nearby. They simply enjoyed the beauty of the mountains. They hunted animals. They explored the valleys. They rested beside clear streams. Among the royal companions was the queen. She was known throughout the kingdom for her beauty and elegance. One afternoon, beneath the warm sunlight of the mountains, the queen and her attendants reached a beautiful spring hidden among the trees. The water was crystal clear. Flowers surrounded the shore. The sound of flowing water created a peaceful atmosphere. The queen decided to bathe. Her attendants carefully placed her royal clothing beside the spring. The queen entered the water. The sunlight reflected upon the surface. The scene appeared like a painting created by nature itself. At that very moment, the second sage was walking through the forest. He was practicing meditation while slowly moving among the trees. His mind was calm. His breathing was peaceful. His awareness was clear. He had no intention of seeing anything. He was simply walking. But destiny brought him to that place. Through the trees, his eyes accidentally fell upon the queen. Only for a moment. Only a single glance. But within that instant, something hidden inside his mind awakened. The desire he believed had disappeared. The attachment he believed he had conquered. The fire he believed had been extinguished. Suddenly, it appeared again. The sage froze. His breath changed. His peaceful mind became disturbed. The decades of discipline he had built were suddenly challenged by one unexpected moment. He quickly turned away. He tried to return his mind to meditation. But something had already changed. The image had entered his thoughts. And the mind began creating countless fantasies. The sage did not realize that the greatest battles are not fought outside. They are fought within. A person may escape from cities. A person may escape from society. A person may escape from worldly possessions. But if the mind has not been completely purified, desire can still follow like a shadow. That evening, the forest remained beautiful. The moon still illuminated the mountains. The rivers still sang their peaceful songs. But inside the heart of the sage, a storm had begun. The power that had allowed him to fly through the sky started disappearing. The deep concentration he had cultivated for years became unstable. The peaceful awareness he once possessed became scattered. For the first time in decades, the sage experienced something he thought he would never face again, a battle with his own mind. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. Do not underestimate a small flame. A forest does not burn because of a mountain. It burns because of a single spark. The night arrived quietly over the Himalayan forest. The golden light of the sunset disappeared behind the mountains. The deep blue sky slowly transformed into darkness. The stars appeared one by one, shining above the endless wilderness. Everything outside remained peaceful. The trees stood silently. The rivers continued their gentle songs. The animals rested beneath the ancient branches. But inside the small meditation hut of the ascetic sage, there was no longer peace. The sage sat alone. His body remained still. But his mind was no longer calm. The image he had accidentally seen during the day continued appearing in his thoughts. He tried to push it away. He tried to return his attention to meditation. He controlled his breathing. He repeated the teachings he had studied for many years. Everything is impermanent. Beauty fades. The body is only a temporary collection of elements. Attachment creates suffering. He knew all these truths. He had taught these truths to others. He had spent decades contemplating these truths. But now, when desire appeared inside his own mind, those teachings felt distant, like words written on the surface of water. The moment the wind moved, they disappeared. The sage became frightened. Not because of the queen. Not because of the external world. But because he suddenly saw the hidden weakness within himself. He thought, how is this possible? I have practiced for so many years. I have abandoned worldly pleasures. I have gained deep meditation. I have even attained supernatural abilities. Why can one brief moment disturb my entire mind? The more he resisted the thought, the stronger it seemed to become, because the mind often works in a mysterious way. When a person fights against an unwanted thought with fear and desperation, the thought may become even stronger. The sage had spent many years controlling his desires. But he had not completely understood the nature of desire. Desire is not destroyed simply by escaping from the world. Desire is not defeated simply by closing the eyes. Desire disappears only when wisdom illuminates the deepest parts of the heart. The sage remained sitting through the night. The moon moved across the sky. The cold mountain wind entered his hut, yet he could not return to his previous state of concentration. The deep meditation that once felt effortless became unreachable. The peaceful mind that once felt like a still lake became disturbed by countless waves. Before this moment, he could enter meditation whenever he wished. His consciousness could become vast and clear. He could experience freedom beyond ordinary understanding. But now, his mind followed another direction. It returned again and again to the image that had appeared before him. The sage began losing the abilities he had cultivated. The power that allowed him to move through the sky disappeared. The connection with higher states of consciousness weakened. The spiritual strength that once surrounded him gradually faded. Like a lamp without oil. Like a flower without water. Like a river slowly drying beneath the burning sun. The sage realized that his greatest achievement had disappeared. He could no longer remain peaceful. He could no longer experience the same clarity. He had fallen from the height of concentration. Days passed. Then weeks. The once powerful ascetic became weak and troubled. He stopped eating properly. He could not sleep peacefully. His body remained in the forest, but his mind wandered endlessly. The birds continued singing around him. The flowers continued blooming. The mountains remained unchanged. But the sage felt trapped inside his own thoughts. The very forest that once gave him joy now became a place filled with memories of his suffering. During this period, the Bodhisattva sage noticed something unusual. The two ascetics had often met before. They had shared teachings. They had encouraged each other. But recently, the second sage had stopped visiting. He no longer came to discuss the Dharma. He no longer walked freely through the mountains. His presence had become distant. The Bodhisattva understood immediately. A person's outer behavior often reveals the condition of the inner mind. Someone who is peaceful naturally spreads peace. Someone who is troubled cannot hide the storm inside. The Bodhisattva walked toward the sage's hut. The path was covered with fallen leaves. The mountain wind moved gently through the trees. When he arrived, he saw his friend sitting silently. But the person before him was different from the sage he once knew. The bright confidence had disappeared. The calm expression was gone. His eyes carried exhaustion and regret. The Bodhisattva entered quietly. He sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. Sometimes compassion does not begin with advice. Sometimes compassion begins with simply being present. The Bodhisattva waited patiently. Finally, he asked, "My friend, your body remains in this sacred forest, but your mind appears to have traveled somewhere far away. What has happened? Why has the peace that once surrounded you disappeared?" The ascetic lowered his head. He remained silent for a long time. He felt ashamed. He felt defeated. He, who had once been honored by gods and spirits, now felt unable to control his own thoughts. Finally, he spoke, "Friend, my practice has collapsed. My years of discipline have become useless. I thought I had overcome desire. I thought my heart was free. But I was mistaken." The Bodhisattva listened carefully. The sage continued, "Today, while walking through the forest, I accidentally saw the queen bathing near the mountain spring. It was only one moment. Only one glance. But that moment awakened something I believed was already gone. My mind became disturbed. My meditation disappeared. My supernatural abilities vanished. I cannot return to the peace I once knew." His voice trembled. "I spent decades climbing toward freedom. But one small moment pushed me back into suffering." The Bodhisattva looked at him with compassion. He did not judge him. He did not criticize him. Because he understood something important: the purpose of wisdom is not to punish weakness. The purpose of wisdom is to reveal the path back to freedom. The Bodhisattva knew this was not only the story of one ascetic. It was the story of every human heart. Every person carries hidden tendencies. Every person has moments of weakness. The question is not whether difficulties will appear. The question is, when they appear, will we understand them? Will we learn from them? Will we return to the path with greater awareness? The Bodhisattva prepared to offer the teaching that would become the turning point of the sage's life. A teaching about desire. A teaching about guarding the senses. A teaching about the hidden power of a single thought. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. The greatest enemy is not always outside the door. Sometimes it is a forgotten seed sleeping quietly within the heart. The Himalayan forest remained silent as the Bodhisattva sat beside his troubled friend. The morning mist moved slowly between the trees. A soft golden light entered through the leaves. The mountains watched quietly, as they had watched countless generations of seekers arrive, struggle, awaken, and transform. The Bodhisattva did not immediately speak. He understood that a wounded mind cannot always receive wisdom immediately. Before giving teachings, one must first create a space of compassion. A heart filled with shame cannot hear clearly. A mind trapped in self-blame cannot see the path forward. So the Bodhisattva simply sat beside the ascetic. There was no anger in his eyes. No disappointment. No judgment. Only kindness. After some time, the Bodhisattva gently said, "My friend, do not think that your mistake has destroyed your entire journey. The person who recognizes a weakness has already taken the first step toward overcoming it. The greatest danger is not falling. The greatest danger is falling and refusing to stand again." The ascetic lifted his head. He looked at the Bodhisattva with tears in his eyes. "But how can I forgive myself?" he asked. "I spent decades practicing purity. I believed my mind was beyond desire. I believed I had reached a place where temptation could no longer touch me. Yet a single moment destroyed everything." The Bodhisattva looked toward the distant mountains. Then he replied, "Friend, your suffering does not come only from desire. It also comes from pride." The ascetic was surprised. "Pride?" The Bodhisattva nodded. "Yes. Because somewhere within your heart, there was a thought hidden beneath your practice. A thought that said, 'I am already beyond temptation.' A thought that said, 'I am stronger than ordinary beings.' But a true practitioner does not become fearless by believing he is invincible. A true practitioner becomes wise by understanding that the mind must always be watched." The ascetic became silent. The words entered deeply into his heart. The Bodhisattva continued, even a great tree can be destroyed by a tiny insect. Even a strong fortress can fall through a small opening. Even a person who has cultivated great meditation can be disturbed if the doors of the senses are left unguarded. The mind has 6 gates. Through the eyes, we receive forms. Through the ears, we receive sounds. Through the nose, we receive smells. Through the tongue, we receive tastes. Through the body, we receive sensations. Through consciousness, we receive thoughts. These 6 gates are constantly exposed to the outside world. If we do not guard them carefully, countless desires can enter. The Bodhisattva picked up a small leaf from the ground. He held it gently between his fingers. This leaf appears simple, but within it exists the entire process of nature. It grows because of sunlight. It survives because of water. It changes because of conditions. Everything depends on causes and circumstances. Human emotions are the same. Desire does not appear from nowhere. It arises because conditions come together. A sight appears. A memory awakens. A feeling develops. Then attachment begins. The wise person does not fight the world with hatred. The wise person understands the process before it becomes a chain. The ascetic listened carefully. The Bodhisattva continued, "You practiced meditation for many years. You controlled your body. You controlled your actions. You purified your external life. But perhaps you did not completely understand the hidden movements of the mind. The deepest attachments are not always visible. They sleep beneath awareness. Like seeds buried under the earth. When there is no rain, they remain hidden. But when the right conditions arrive, they begin to grow." The ascetic lowered his head. He realized that his greatest mistake was not seeing the queen. The mistake was believing he had already defeated desire forever. He had mistaken temporary calmness for complete liberation. He had mistaken suppression for true freedom. The Bodhisattva then spoke a verse, "For countless years one may cultivate meditation, and through discipline gain extraordinary power. Yet if the eye meets an object with attachment, the hidden fire may rise again." A pure path requires constant awareness. The senses are like open doors. Without careful guarding, unwanted guests may enter. Desire is like a wildfire. A single spark can burn 1,000 forests. Therefore, protect the mind. Protect the senses. Protect the beginning of every thought. The ascetic listened in silence. Each word was like medicine. Not medicine that removed pain instantly, but medicine that revealed the cause of suffering. For many years, he had fought against the outside world. Now he understood, the true battlefield was within. The Bodhisattva continued, "My friend, do not hate yourself because desire appeared. Hating desire creates another form of attachment. Instead, observe it. Understand it. Learn from it. When darkness appears, do not curse the darkness. Simply bring a lamp. The lamp of wisdom. The ascetic felt a change within his heart. The shame that had trapped him began to loosen. The confusion that had surrounded him began to disappear. For the first time since losing his powers, he felt a small ray of hope. The Bodhisattva had not come to tell him that he was a failure. He had come to remind him that the path of awakening continues even after falling, because every fall can become a teacher. Every mistake can become wisdom. Every weakness can reveal where greater awareness is needed. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. A river does not stop flowing because it meets a stone. It changes direction. It continues toward the ocean. The words of the Bodhisattva entered the heart of the ascetic like gentle rain falling upon dry land. For many days, the ascetic had been trapped in suffering. He blamed himself. He questioned his entire path. He believed that everything he had achieved had disappeared forever. But now, for the first time, he began to see his experience from another perspective. Perhaps this failure was not the end. Perhaps it was a doorway. A doorway that revealed a truth he had never fully understood. The Bodhisattva looked at his friend and continued, "My friend, many people believe that the greatest danger comes from the outside world. They believe that if they leave society, leave wealth, and leave comfort behind, they will automatically become free. But the true prison is not outside. The true prison is within the mind. A person may live inside a palace and still be trapped. Another person may live in a forest and still carry chains. The location of the body does not determine freedom. The condition of the heart does." The ascetic listened quietly. He remembered his early days in the mountains. He had believed that by leaving the world behind, he had already escaped suffering. He had thought that distance from temptation meant victory over temptation. But now he understood, running away from something is not the same as being free from it. A person can close their eyes and still dream. A person can leave the city and still carry the city inside the mind. A person can abandon possessions and still cling to pride. The Bodhisattva said, "Desire is like a seed. When the seed is buried deep beneath the earth, people may think nothing exists. But the seed has not disappeared. It is simply waiting for the right conditions. When sunlight, water, and soil come together, the seed begins to grow. The same is true of the mind. Hidden tendencies may remain silent for many years. But when the proper conditions appear, they can suddenly rise. The ascetic lowered his eyes. He finally understood. The queen was not the true cause of his suffering. The external image was only a condition. The real cause was the attachment hidden within himself. The Bodhisattva continued, "Do not blame the object of desire. A beautiful form is only a form. A pleasant sound is only a sound. A sweet fragrance is only a fragrance. The problem does not exist in the world itself. The problem is the mind that grasps." The ascetic reflected deeply upon these words. For years, he had looked at desire as an enemy outside himself. He imagined temptation as something separate from him. But now he saw clearly, the enemy he feared was not outside. It was a movement within his own consciousness. The Bodhisattva said, "Imagine a person carrying a small amount of oil in a fragile bowl while walking through a crowded marketplace. If the person focuses only on the surrounding distractions, the oil will spill. But if the person carefully watches the bowl, the journey can be completed safely." Life is the same. The world is the marketplace. The senses are the distractions. The mind is the bowl of oil. The practitioner must walk carefully. Not because the world is evil. Not because beauty is evil. Not because life itself is something to reject, but because an untrained mind can become lost. The ascetic listened with deep attention. The Bodhisattva continued, "Many practitioners fall into two extremes. Some believe they can completely avoid all challenges. They hide from the world and believe this alone is purity. Others believe they are strong enough to face every temptation without preparation. They walk directly into danger and underestimate their own habits. Both paths contain mistakes. The wise practitioner understands the middle way. Respect the power of conditions. Understand the weakness of the mind. Practice humility. Remain aware." The ascetic remembered how confident he had once been. He had respected discipline. But he had underestimated humility. He had gained powerful meditation. But he had forgotten that the journey never ends. The Bodhisattva looked at him and said, "Even the greatest river must continue flowing. If it believes it has already reached the ocean, it will stop moving. But stopping means losing its purpose. Practice is the same. No matter how high one climbs, awareness must continue. No matter how peaceful the mind becomes, humility must remain. No matter how strong concentration becomes, the senses must still be guarded." The ascetic felt something slowly changing. The pain in his heart was transforming. The suffering that had crushed him was becoming understanding. He no longer saw himself as a broken person. He saw himself as a practitioner who had discovered a hidden weakness. And discovering a weakness is the beginning of strengthening it. The Bodhisattva then shared another teaching: a person who knows where the enemy hides can prepare. But a person who believes there is no enemy will be defeated without warning. The danger is not that desire appears. The danger is believing desire can never appear. The ascetic bowed his head. He finally understood the deeper lesson. His decades of meditation had not been wasted. The experience had revealed the next stage of his cultivation. Before, he had practiced controlling the world outside. Now, he needed to understand the world within. Before, he had guarded his actions. Now, he needed to guard the source of those actions. The thoughts. The feelings. The subtle movements of consciousness. The invisible beginning of every attachment. The forest became quiet again. The sunlight slowly moved across the mountains. The ascetic remained beside the Bodhisattva. But something had changed. The storm inside his mind was beginning to settle. Not because desire had disappeared instantly, but because wisdom had appeared. And wherever wisdom shines, darkness begins to lose its power. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. The deepest darkness is not defeated by fighting it. It is defeated when a lamp is brought into the room. The mountains remained unchanged. The clouds continued drifting above the snowy peaks. The rivers continued flowing through the valleys. The world outside the ascetic's heart remained exactly as it had always been. But within his own mind, everything had changed. Before this moment, the ascetic believed that his greatest achievement was his ability to remain untouched by the disturbances of the world. He had spent countless years refining his concentration. He had controlled his body. He had disciplined his speech. He had observed his thoughts. Through endless practice, he had entered deep states of meditation. His mind had become clear. His awareness had become powerful. His consciousness had reached levels beyond ordinary human experience. He had gained abilities that seemed impossible to common people. He could rise into the sky. He could travel freely through vast distances. He could enter deep meditation whenever he wished. The gods and spirits of the mountains respected him. They believed that he had reached a level of purity rarely seen among humans. Yet the event at the mountain spring revealed a hidden truth. A person's external achievements do not always represent the complete condition of the heart. A person may have great knowledge. A person may have great discipline. A person may even possess extraordinary abilities. But if the deepest roots of attachment remain untouched, the journey is not complete. After speaking with the Bodhisattva, the ascetic began to understand his mistake. However, understanding the mistake did not immediately restore what had been lost. The mind that has been disturbed needs time to become peaceful again. The river that has been shaken by a storm needs time to become clear again. The ascetic returned to his hut. He began practicing again. He watched his breathing. He observed his thoughts. He tried to return to the stillness he once knew. But the path was no longer as easy as before. The memories continued appearing. The thoughts continued returning. The desire that had awakened within him had created waves in the mind. And every wave disturbed the reflection of wisdom. Days passed. Then months. The ascetic continued his practice. But he felt the difference. Before, meditation had been like entering a peaceful lake. Now, meditation felt like trying to calm a lake after a great storm. Before, his mind naturally rested in silence. Now, he had to patiently rebuild that silence. The disappearance of his supernatural abilities became a powerful lesson. He had once believed that these abilities represented his spiritual achievement. But now he understood, they were not the true goal. They were only temporary results of concentration. The real achievement was the transformation of the heart. A person who can fly through the sky but cannot calm the mind is still bound. A person who can see distant places but cannot see the movements of their own thoughts is still blind. A person who can influence the outside world but cannot understand the inside world has not reached true freedom. The Bodhisattva's teaching continued echoing in his heart. Guard the 6 senses. Watch the beginning of every thought. Do not underestimate a small attachment. The ascetic reflected deeply. He realized that his previous practice had focused too much on gaining power. He had enjoyed the peace of meditation. He had appreciated the abilities that came with it. But perhaps he had forgotten something more important: humility. True wisdom does not make a person feel superior. True wisdom makes a person more careful. The strongest warrior is not the one who believes he can never lose. The strongest warrior is the one who understands his own weaknesses and prepares for them. The ascetic began to practice with a new attitude. Before, he meditated to achieve higher states. Now, he meditated to understand himself. Before, he sought extraordinary experiences. Now, he sought clarity. Before, he wanted to conquer the world of appearances. Now, he wanted to understand the source of attachment. This change became the beginning of a deeper transformation. Meanwhile, the Bodhisattva continued living peacefully in the forest. He did not force his friend to change. He did not demand immediate progress. He simply offered guidance and allowed wisdom to work naturally. Because true teaching is like planting a seed. The teacher can provide water. The teacher can provide sunlight. But the seed must grow through its own inner process. The Bodhisattva understood that every being walks their own path. Some learn through gentle inspiration. Some learn through suffering. Some learn through losing something they deeply valued. The ascetic's loss had become his teacher. The disappearance of his powers had revealed the impermanence of all achievements. The failure he feared had become the foundation of greater wisdom. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, the ascetic sat beside a quiet stream. He watched the reflection of the sky upon the water. A leaf fell from a tree. The moment the leaf touched the surface, the reflection disappeared. Then slowly, the water became clear again. The ascetic smiled. He understood. The mind was like this stream. Thoughts may appear. Desires may arise. Emotions may disturb the surface. But with awareness and patience, clarity can return. The goal was not to create a mind that never experiences movement. The goal was to develop a mind that understands movement. The goal was not to become someone who never encounters darkness. The goal was to become someone who knows how to bring light. From that day forward, the ascetic no longer practiced with pride. He practiced with humility. He no longer believed, "I have defeated desire." Instead, he remembered, "I must always understand the mind." And this simple change transformed his entire journey. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. The moon does not disappear because clouds cover it. It simply waits. When the clouds move away, its light returns. Time continued to flow through the Himalayan forest. The seasons changed. The snow melted from the mountain peaks. New flowers appeared beside the streams. The birds returned to sing among the branches. Nature continued its endless rhythm. And within this peaceful wilderness, the ascetic began a new chapter of his practice. It was not the same practice as before. The old ascetic had practiced with great determination. But hidden within that determination was a subtle belief: I have already overcome. I have already reached a place beyond ordinary weakness. I am no longer affected by the things that disturb common people. Now, that belief had been broken. And from the pieces of that broken pride, something new began to grow. Humility. The ascetic slowly realized that humility was not a sign of weakness. Humility was the doorway to deeper wisdom. A person who believes they have nothing left to learn closes the door of awakening. A person who remains open, even after great achievement, continues to grow. The Bodhisattva had not destroyed his confidence. He had transformed it. Before, the ascetic believed in his own strength. Now, he trusted the power of awareness. Before, he believed discipline meant controlling everything. Now, he understood discipline meant observing everything clearly. Before, he wanted to defeat desire. Now, he wanted to understand desire. This change was profound. Because fighting against something often gives it more energy. But understanding something removes its hidden power. The ascetic returned deeper into the forest. He chose a place even more isolated than before. There were no visitors. No conversations. No distractions. Only mountains. Trees. Rivers, and the quiet movement of his own mind. He built a simple hut beneath ancient trees. He collected fallen branches. He gathered leaves for bedding. He lived with even greater simplicity. Every morning, before the first light touched the mountains, he sat in meditation. He watched the breath enter. He watched the breath leave. He observed thoughts appearing and disappearing. Sometimes memories arose. Sometimes desires appeared. Sometimes old emotions returned. But this time, he did not fear them. He did not fight them. He did not hate them. He simply observed, like watching clouds pass across the sky. A cloud appears. A cloud changes shape. A cloud disappears. The sky itself remains untouched. The ascetic began to understand, the mind is like the sky. Thoughts are like clouds. Desires are like passing winds. They may appear. They may move. But they do not define the true nature of awareness. Slowly, the storms within him became weaker. The attachment that once seemed overwhelming began losing its strength. The memory that once controlled him became only a memory. The thought that once created suffering became only a thought. He discovered a deeper form of freedom. Not the freedom of escaping all experiences, but the freedom of no longer being controlled by them. The Bodhisattva occasionally visited him. He did not come to test him. He did not come to judge his progress. he simply came as a friend. One day, while sitting beside the forest stream, the Bodhisattva asked, "My friend, what have you learned from this experience?" The ascetic remained silent for a moment. Then he answered, "I learned that the mind is deeper than I imagined. I thought I understood desire. But I only understood the surface. I thought years of practice meant I could never fall. But now I understand that true practice means knowing how to rise after falling." The Bodhisattva smiled. This was the answer he hoped to hear. Because awakening is not a story of never making mistakes. It is a story of continuously becoming wiser. The Bodhisattva said, "A person who has never faced a storm may believe they are strong. But the person who has survived a storm understands true strength. The tree that bends in the wind becomes stronger. The tree that refuses to bend may break." The ascetic looked at the trees surrounding them. He understood. His suffering had not destroyed his path. It had refined his path. The experience had removed arrogance. It had strengthened awareness. It had transformed knowledge into wisdom. From that day forward, the ascetic guarded his senses more carefully. When he saw beautiful forms, he observed without attachment. When he heard pleasant sounds, he observed without grasping. When emotions appeared, he watched them without becoming lost. He practiced the teaching of mindfulness. Every moment became an opportunity. Every sensation became a lesson. Every thought became a chance to understand the nature of the mind. Years passed. The forest witnessed his transformation. The same person who once lost his peace because of one glance became someone with deeper understanding than before. Not because he had become someone who never experienced desire, but because he had learned how to meet desire with wisdom. The Bodhisattva's teaching had become a living truth within him. Protect the senses. Observe the mind. Remain humble. Never underestimate hidden tendencies. These principles became the foundation of his renewed practice. And slowly, through patience and dedication, the light of meditation began returning. The stillness returned. The clarity returned. The inner strength returned. But this time, something was different. Before, his peace came from control. Now, his peace came from understanding. Before, he protected his purity through avoidance. Now, he protected his purity through wisdom. This was a much deeper freedom. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. A broken branch can grow again. Sometimes the place where it breaks becomes the place where new strength begins. Years passed quietly in the deep Himalayan forest. The world outside continued its endless movement. Kingdoms rose and fell. People were born and departed. Generations changed. But within the mountains, the ascetic continued his silent practice. He no longer measured his progress by extraordinary experiences. He no longer searched for signs that he had become special. He no longer desired the admiration of spirits or the respect of others. His practice became simple. His heart became quiet. Each breath became a teaching. Each moment became an opportunity to awaken. The ascetic discovered a truth that he had not fully understood before: the purpose of meditation is not to gain power. The purpose of meditation is to become free. The purpose of discipline is not to create pride. The purpose of discipline is to create clarity. The purpose of purity is not to separate oneself from the world. The purpose of purity is to see the world without being controlled by it. With this understanding, his practice became deeper than before. Every morning, as the first light touched the snowy mountains, he sat beneath the trees. The cold wind moved around him. Birds flew above him. Leaves fell beside him. But his mind remained steady. He observed every sensation. He observed every thought. He observed every emotion. Nothing was rejected. Nothing was chased. Everything was understood. Slowly, the disturbances within his mind became weaker. The waves became smaller. The water became clearer. And one day, while sitting in meditation beside a quiet mountain stream, something changed. The mind that had once been filled with confusion became completely still. The thoughts that once appeared like storms became gentle movements. The heart that once struggled against desire became peaceful. The ascetic entered deep meditation again. The four jhanas returned. The profound states of concentration returned. The connection between mind and wisdom became stronger. And gradually, the abilities he had lost also began to return. But this time, they returned differently. Before, these abilities had strengthened his confidence. Now, they strengthened his responsibility. Before, he saw them as achievements. Now, he saw them as temporary conditions. Before, he thought, "I have reached something extraordinary." Now, he understood, all things arise because of conditions, and all things can change. The return of his abilities did not create pride. Instead, it created humility. Because he had experienced loss. He had experienced failure. He had experienced the weakness hidden within his own mind. And because of this, he became more compassionate toward all beings. He understood the struggles of ordinary people. He understood why people become trapped by desire. He understood why people repeat harmful actions. Because he had seen the same forces within himself. The person who has never faced darkness may judge those who are lost. But the person who has walked through darkness can offer a hand. The ascetic's wisdom became deeper. His compassion became wider. His understanding became clearer. The Bodhisattva visited him again. When they met beside the mountain stream, the Bodhisattva smiled. He could see the transformation immediately. The ascetic was peaceful. But this peace was different from before. Before, his peace was fragile. Now, his peace was stable. Before, his calmness depended on avoiding difficulties. Now, his calmness remained even when difficulties appeared. The Bodhisattva asked, "My friend, do you still fear desire?" The ascetic looked at the flowing water. Then he answered, "I no longer fear it. But I also no longer underestimate it." The Bodhisattva smiled. This was the wisdom he had hoped the ascetic would discover. Fear and arrogance are two extremes. One says, "I am powerless." The other says, "I cannot be defeated." Both are forms of misunderstanding. True wisdom says, "I understand the mind. I respect conditions. I remain aware." The ascetic continued, "Before, I believed purity meant never being touched by darkness. Now I understand that purity means seeing darkness clearly without becoming darkness. Before, I believed strength meant never falling. Now I understand that strength means returning to the path with greater awareness." The Bodhisattva nodded. This was the transformation of a true practitioner. Not someone who never experiences difficulty, but someone who transforms difficulty into wisdom. The forest continued its silent existence. The mountains continued watching over the sages. And deep within the Himalayan wilderness, two practitioners continued walking the path toward liberation. One had learned through constant discipline. The other had learned through losing and recovering. But both had discovered the same truth: the human mind is powerful. And because it is powerful, it must be understood. The ink spirit whispers asterisk. Gold is not purified by avoiding the fire. It becomes pure by passing through the fire. Years passed quietly in the deep Himalayan forest. The world outside continued its endless movement. Kingdoms rose and fell. People were born and departed. Generations changed. But within the mountains, the ascetic continued his silent practice. He no longer measured his progress by extraordinary experiences. He no longer searched for signs that he had become special. He no longer desired the admiration of spirits or the respect of others. His practice became simple. His heart became quiet. Each breath became a teaching. Each moment became an opportunity to awaken. The ascetic discovered a truth that he had not fully understood before. The purpose of meditation is not to gain power. The purpose of meditation is to become free. The purpose of discipline is not to create pride. The purpose of discipline is to create clarity. The purpose of purity is not to separate oneself from the world. The purpose of purity is to see the world without being controlled by it. With this understanding, his practice became deeper than before. Every morning, as the first light touched the snowy mountains, he sat beneath the trees. The cold wind moved around him. Birds flew above him. Leaves fell beside him. But his mind remained steady. He observed every sensation. He observed every thought. He observed every emotion. Nothing was rejected. Nothing was chased. Everything was understood. Slowly, the disturbances within his mind became weaker. The waves became smaller. The water became clearer. And one day, while sitting in meditation beside a quiet mountain stream, something changed. The mind that had once been filled with confusion became completely still. The thoughts that once appeared like storms became gentle movements. The heart that once struggled against desire became peaceful. The ascetic entered deep meditation again. The four jhanas returned. The profound states of concentration returned. The connection between mind and wisdom became stronger. And gradually, the abilities he had lost also began to return. But this time, they returned differently. Before, these abilities had strengthened his confidence. Now, they strengthened his responsibility. Before, he saw them as achievements. Now, he saw them as temporary conditions. Before, he thought, I have reached something extraordinary. Now, he understood, all things arise because of conditions, and all things can change. The return of his abilities did not create pride. Instead, it created humility. Because he had experienced loss. He had experienced failure. He had experienced the weakness hidden within his own mind. And because of this, he became more compassionate toward all beings. He understood the struggles of ordinary people. He understood why people become trapped by desire. He understood why people repeat harmful actions. Because he had seen the same forces within himself. The person who has never faced darkness may judge those who are lost. But the person who has walked through darkness can offer a hand. The ascetic's wisdom became deeper. His compassion became wider. His understanding became clearer. The Bodhisattva visited him again. When they met beside the mountain stream, the Bodhisattva smiled. He could see the transformation immediately. The ascetic was peaceful. But this peace was different from before. Before, his peace was fragile. Now, his peace was stable. Before, his calmness depended on avoiding difficulties. Now, his calmness remained even when difficulties appeared. The Bodhisattva asked, "My friend, do you still fear desire?" The ascetic looked at the flowing water. Then he answered, "I no longer fear it. But I also no longer underestimate it." The Bodhisattva smiled. This was the wisdom he had hoped the ascetic would discover. Fear and arrogance are two extremes. One says, "I am powerless." The other says, "I cannot be defeated." Both are forms of misunderstanding. True wisdom says, "I understand the mind. I respect conditions. I remain aware." The ascetic continued, "Before, I believed purity meant never being touched by darkness. Now I understand that purity means seeing darkness clearly without becoming darkness. Before, I believed strength meant never falling. Now I understand that strength means returning to the path with greater awareness." The Bodhisattva nodded. This was the transformation of a true practitioner. Not someone who never experiences difficulty, but someone who transforms difficulty into wisdom. The forest continued its silent existence. The mountains continued watching over the sages. And deep within the Himalayan wilderness, two practitioners continued walking the path toward liberation. One had learned through constant discipline. The other had learned through losing and recovering. But both had discovered the same truth: the human mind is powerful. And because it is powerful, it must be understood. The ink spirit whispers *. Gold is not purified by avoiding the fire. It becomes pure by passing through the fire.